And to talk more on this now, we are joined by Build One South Africa movement leader, Mmusi Maimane, and he joins us via our Zoom line. Mr. Maimane, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Really a heartbreaking and a tragic story. Why did you, as the leader of Build One South Africa, had to resort to this measure now to actually open a case against the state?
Good evening, and good evening to fellow South Africans. Let me again reiterate my deepest condolences to the family. And I think a nation grieves the life of a little girl, because this is not just the only girl. This is so many South Africans whose lives are impacted by load shedding, in hers, in the worst form possible, by losing her own life. And therefore, as a society, we cannot sit by and watch such action take place. We took a decision to open a criminal case for culpability because at the end of the day, there's a natural presumed action that says we must just switch off the electricity in order to prevent worst case scenario. In which instance, for this family, this is worst case scenario. The state failed to provide alternative energy as per court order that we have been granted, that we fought in the North Gauteng High Court, that says that the state must take reasonable measures to provide alternative energy in places of healthcare, education, and police stations. And therefore it failed. These are lives that are being lost. It's no different to when the state fails to maintain water treatment plants, that people die of cholera. It's no mistake when states leave pit latrines in schools and children die. So it's treating the most vulnerable citizens, which are children, in the worst way possible. And I think really this is a government that is no longer working in the interests of the people.
And Mmusi, when you open this case, and if maybe we can talk more about what will form part of your arguments here, will that be solely around the negligence of government, or will it be government's failure to provide electricity for South Africans?
It's on both, because the negligent aspect says that, especially the community of Bromhof and many citizens in Johannesburg, keep in mind that when load shedding occurs, what happens after that is that sometimes power stations fail. You end up with not only the schedule that we are told is going to be load shedding, that gets extended. There's such a policy such as load reduction. Therefore, the lack of provision of energy is actually undermining constitutional rights, because today we are talking about health failing, but tomorrow it could be safety and a police station not able to work. Or on another day, a child can't go to school because they can't be studying without load shedding. So that's on one score. The second is we've made a proposal to say we need to see an action plan. I've proposed to government that they must build, own, operate solutions where people who've got excess energy can provide, whether it be safe nuclear or whether it be gas, wind, or hydro. The state simply rejects that argument. And then furthermore, we're asking them to comply with the court order, which says in 60 days they must do their jobs. Instead, they are claiming financial issues and that there can be a situation where we have a complete grid loss, knowing very well that when ministers were asking for generators, etc., they got them immediately. And that, in fact, alternative energy was found for them. So why are ministers of government more important than the people of this country? So the case is both legal and moral in the way that this government is treating our people.
And Mmusi, you keep on making reference to that court case that was heard in the North Gauteng High Court, and of course saying that the state needs to provide alternative electricity, and that being for schools, being for hospitals, being for police stations. When you look at the sentiments coming out from government saying that, well, if they indeed do provide electricity for these very important institutions, we may face a grid shutdown of the electricity system, and we may face a blackout in South Africa. Do you buy that kind of rhetoric coming out from government saying that we do not have the capacity to have these other institutions being prioritized?
Well, this is a government now that is now committed to even misleading the people of this country. On the first, to your point, energy management is about both supply and demand. If you are going to deal with the demand component, taking out schools, healthcare facilities, and police stations is the reduction of demand. We have a 6,000 megawatt shortfall. So if you take those schools out, in fact, you will be adding to the stability of the grid. The only way we're going to get through load shedding is by fixing ESCOM, reducing demand, and supplementing by using, as I say, build, own, operate models. So the first is that let's reduce demand. They made the same case in the court, and the courts dismissed it because it's a fallacy that they are making to the people of this country to say that to achieve that, that's not the case. But then they continue further to say that if we have a grid loss, as Andre de Ruyter, former CEO, argued in his court papers, that you'll have conditions similar to Venezuela, who went through a similar grid loss situation, which is when you don't have water, you don't have any of that. But in truth, citizens are already living in Venezuela. People, when there's load shedding, there's also water shedding because sewage plants stop working. Already people are feeling unsafe, and now a child has died. So what conditions are they threatening us with that already in the stages that we're in, where there are in certain communities up to 11 hours of no energy during the day? These conditions are already prevailing. So I refuse to accept the argument that the government is putting. The courts rejected it. And therefore, I really do think that after 15 years, for them to introduce new false narratives, in essence, is simply to delay the process. I command them to act now, and I'm saying to them, we do not need load shedding. We can augment energy, and we can make sure that we stabilize the grid so South Africa can grow and prosper.
And going back to that court matter in the North Gauteng High Court, Mmusi, of course, we saw government is indeed appealing that. What does it say about government, especially during a time where they are being asked to prioritize certain institutions which are very important to making this country work?
It says that this is a government that is now becoming more of an enemy of the people. It no longer cares. It now, if you like, in its culpability, is willing to let people die. I mean, that is the most pernicious cost of load shedding. It is, in fact, the fact that they've allowed businesses to shut down because they do not care that people are on the streets hungry, without work. This is a government that no longer cares about the people of this country. And I can't sit here and simply say we're going to keep laying blame. I'm now calling on all citizens. Let's work together in this instance and begin to say we don't have a government that looks after us. How do we help one another? That's why being in a solution-orientated organization, I've already called on the private sector to say, bring on inverters, bring on generators. Let's give to particularly poor citizens that we must act. But we dare never forget that it is the ANC government that has brought us to this mess. They mustn't suddenly blame other variables. We must hold them to account.
And Mmusi, I'm sure you have spoken to the 3-year-old girl's parents. What are their thoughts with you and this latest action and taking this matter straight to court? Because, I mean, you're trying to prevent this from taking place again, where another family is left without a loved one because of problems with load shedding.
You know, this is where it gets hard because I am a father myself, and I'm a father of a 3-year-old. You do everything you want as a father to protect. So when I spoke to the father of this little girl, your heart is shattered. Because you imagine not only yourself in that situation, but you think about them. They are now obviously preparation for funerals. The funeral is on Wednesday. You realize just the absolute trauma this is in a preventable death. The father reflected back at me as we spoke together to say, look, if the death of my daughter serves to make sure that no other child dies, and this court case fights that battle, we are fully in support. It gave us this courage to say we must not, for not only for this little girl, but for the many others in this country. So indeed, as painful as it is, I know even the mother is going through a dark period. And it will take a while. but let's make sure that this pain is not replicated in many other homes.
All right, then. Thank you very much. That is Mmusi Maimane, the leader there of Build One South Africa movement.